technology brought in 1993. Now, whenever, anywhere in the country, there is a repaving of a road, a curb cut is added, which makes it possible for people in wheelchairs to navigate our cities, and also a lot easier for us. But curb cuts are only the beginning. Steve also, through a lawsuit, forced the Philadelphia Housing Authority to add more accessible units for people with disabilities. Steve opened up the suburban station for people with disabilities, paratransit and taxi cabs, all for people with disabilities. Steve made possible accessible polling places. This is probably enough achievement for any one person in a lifetime. But what Steve will probably be most remembered for is the way that he changed the way we think about civil rights for people with disabilities, in his case, Helen L., and other cases. When the Americans with Disabilities Act was first enacted, there was this idea in it that to unnecessarily institutionalize people with disabilities was itself a form of discrimination. But at the time, people thought that was just an aspiration. It wasn't really an enforceable right. But Steve thought differently. Steve represented a woman who wanted to live at home. And her doctor said she could live it. She was a woman with a disability, and her doctor said she could live at home with some help. But the state program said, no, the only way we will fund you is if you live in a nursing home. Steve said, no, this is discrimination under this new ADA. The Third Circuit Court of Appeals agreed. Courts around the country agreed with the Third Circuit. And then the US Supreme Court made that the law of the land in Olmsted. This is a case that affected hundreds of thousands of people around the country, and it's because of Steve. Yeah, But a list of Steve's cases doesn't come close to describing the man. Steve is fearless. He is relentless. There is no hesitation with Steve, no dithering. He yells a lot. He sees a wrong, he gets set to fix it, and he does. And inside this fierce advocate, there's also a genuine, kind, and caring human being. There's an army of people out there, many of you are here tonight, who were mentored by Steve. Steve's clients and their families become lifelong friends. And Steve has taught us all a lesson about what it means to be a public interest lawyer. Steve does not just swoop down and decide what's right for the client and decide what the client needs and what the strategy should be. Instead, Steve listens deeply. He listens to the people within the disability rights movement, and he's guided by what his clients think is important and the strategies his clients think are necessary. Steve, the world is a better place for people with disabilities and all of us because of you. It is my extreme honor to give to you our first Thaddeus Stevens Award. Yeah.
Thaddeus Stevens is a real hero of mine, quite an amazing Pennsylvanian. Thank you all very, very much for coming. I can't see anyone out there. Tonight brings together Jenny only gave me 3 minutes, brings together 3 loves of mine. First, in the 70s, I worked for Community Legal Services and absolutely loved working there, and I probably never would have left but for some various things. Second love is the Public Interest Law Center, where I have been a tenant for 30-some years. And the third love, and I really mean this deeply, is my wife, from whom I really thank very much for all the support she's given me. I thank PILCOP for this honor, but much more important, that for the past 35 years, the collegiality I've had, this includes older colleagues, Michael, Tom, and particularly, not age-wise, just longevity, and the younger folks, who patiently gave me a lot of technical support, who gave me a lot of optimism. I don't want to in any way denigrate the colleagues from CLS, many of whom are here tonight, George, John, etc. Thank you all very much. I also thank PILCOP for putting up, as Jenny correctly said, with my loud voice and my inability to close my door and keep my office tidy and neat. I clearly won the award for PILCOP in that regard. Yes, lawsuits can make a difference. In preparation for this event, I thought about the progress we have made since 1982 with disabilities issues. The barriers we've overcome, but much more importantly, that we still face. I've been extremely lucky to be part of a disability movement, and it really is an incredible, incredible movement. Yeah. I've learned an awful lot from people with disabilities and their struggles, and I've been really, really proud and happy to be part of it. The following remarks are intended to give hope and optimism to attorneys, and particularly the younger attorneys in this room. Think back before the ADA's enactment, 1990. We saw very, very few people with disabilities in wheelchairs in the community. We saw very few people with disabilities, period. Intellectual disabilities, mental illness disabilities, etc. They were just invisible. The legal community's opposition and pushback was vigorous after the ADA was passed. I'll never ever forget this, around 1995, I was on a Philadelphia CLA panel with private attorneys from a number of big firms, and some member of the audience asked, what should their clients do with regards to the ADA access issue? And the private attorneys all agreed, don't do anything. Wait, see if your clients are sued. If the clients are not sued, then no consequences, no foul, no blood. If they are sued, it's only an injunction and no monetary damages. So you'll be in the status quo ante. No big deal. And I was just appalled to hear them say that at the time. But that was clearly the attitude. Yes, times have changed. The disability struggle was not then, and is not now, just, quote, physical access. The struggle was broad acceptance of disability as one condition on the human continuum. It is very hard for able-bodied people to understand that many people with disabilities want civil rights. They don't want to be changed. They do not want to be treated as a medical condition, and emphatically do not want pity. They want equality and not to be discriminated against. Access and equality are more than curb cuts, which are definitely a symbol for physical access. But I think the real benefit of curb cuts and the curb cut lawsuit was that it started access in many other contexts. One of the most important issues for me was, and still is, the unnecessary institution of people with disabilities. One of the proudest accomplishments of this struggle is that nearly 400,000, there are nearly 400,000 fewer people with disabilities in nursing homes since we brought the Helen L. case in 1989.
Yeah!
These efforts take These struggles take effort and time. In 1994, medical assistance disability institutional expenditures nationally were 90% in the institution and 10% in community-based services. In 2014, 20 years after we started this campaign, after the disability community made this the #1 issue, for the first time, 2014, the community medical assistance expenditures exceeded the institutional.
Wow. Yeah! About fucking time, Dad.
That occurred only because the disability community never stopped struggling. 20 years, but progress is happening. Most recently, people with disabilities have been in the vanguard of the Affordable Care Act medical assistance struggle. Philadelphia's and National ADAPT, the grassroots disability movement, are my heroes. They put their bodies on the line. Some of you might have seen some of their actions before Senator McConnell's office,
Yeah.
where some got arrested. Several hundred people a few weeks ago in the Capitol got arrested before the Senate Finance Committee. They put their bodies on the line to save medical assistance because their lives were at stake. They slept outside, got arrested, and yes, they won. They saved, at least right now, saved medical assistance. Just like culturally embedded institutional racism, with its long shadow, the institutional bias against people with disabilities has historical antecedents that have proven difficult to eliminate. But it is certainly incontrovertible that the lives of people with disabilities have improved significantly in our lifetimes. Attitudes have certainly been changed. What is also true is that the legacy of eugenics and the value of people with disabilities still is part of our culture that's passed on from one generation to the next. It is not just overt discrimination, not hatred, nor jumping the head of the line, as with race, but similar to race with regard to being treated as, quote, not as worthy, end of quote, as non-disabled. Disability pushes us to examine what equality means beyond just access, to examine inequality in income, housing, education, and healthcare. We must focus on these areas and keep it in the civil rights context. And also, disability teaches us what it means to be equal with human beings. As advocates, we can't let losses depress us, you, too much. And boy, there has been a level of depression. Obviously, they do. But let me conclude with one of my favorite lines. Despair is not a viable political strategy, and we very much need viable strategies.